Here today to tell you a few lessons we learned while doing the cross-border investigation called LuxLeaks or LuxLeaks. This investigation exposed how Luxembourg had colluded with some of the largest multinational companies around the world to help them avoid hundreds of millions of dollars in taxes on profits that they shuffle through Luxembourg. So, thanks to some secret agreements called tax rulings, these companies like Pepsi, IKEA, Disney, and you name it, nearly 500 of them were able to, or sorry, more than 350 of them in our data, they were able to pay tax rates of about 1%, and sometimes even less than that. So the story caused a big storm in Europe and around the world. It really put Jean-Claude Juncker, the new president of the European Commission, in an uncomfortable position because he had had crucial positions as prime minister of Luxembourg at the time when many of these policies were enacted that allowed the multinationals to take advantage of Luxembourg. He faced a vote of no confidence in Europe and survived it. But most importantly, the stories forced the European Commission to expand investigations into tax rulings to all 28 members of the EU. And just a couple of days ago, the ministers of finance in Europe agreed to make these tax rulings more transparent. They are going to have automatic exchange of tax rulings, which will prevent, hopefully, some companies to take advantage of the secrecy. The way they were doing it in Luxembourg. Not all the impact of this story was positive. 2 whistleblowers and 1 reporter working on this story have been indicted in Luxembourg for the leak and for the publication of the story. And one of the journalists indicted is here with us today, Edouard Perrin. He broke the story in 2012, focusing on a small number of companies. And then later, he also joined ICIJ in 2014 to take the story to a global level and to focus on a much larger number of companies. And he was indicted was it late last year or early this year?
April.
In April,
yeah.
In April. So Edouard is an investigative journalist with French production company Premier Lynch. His program is called Cash Investigations. He's now in the US on a Knight Wallace Fellowship at the University of Michigan. We also have Christophe Clerix. He's a reporter with Monde magazine in Belgium, focusing on international affairs. His area of expertise is national security and espionage, and he has written 2 books about spies. And Simon Bowers is an investigative journalist, a financial reporter from The Guardian newspaper. Before investigating Luxembourg, he investigated Guernsey, Jersey, and the Isle of Man. And he also once uncovered the biggest property fraudster in the UK. So we are going to start this great panel with Edouard. Thank you.
Good morning. I have no signal here. Okay. So I was tasked to start investigating tax haven in 2011 for this new program called Cash Investigation. The initial assignment was to go after individuals in tax haven. Yet quite quickly I changed targets because from readings and meeting with different NGOs and advocacy groups, what I recollected was that there was a much bigger, larger story regarding tax agreements and multinational companies. So to start working on this matter, you have to get used to the jargon. It's very complex. Most of the time you don't understand what you are reading. And since you are not a tax analyst, you are not going to be able to learn it because you're just a reporter. So what I recollect from this experience was to go after the keywords. And that really helped me in the beginning because one of the keywords I kept hearing at the time was, it was called rulings. And it was, a ruling was an advanced text. Sorry, I missed the slide now. yeah. Advanced tax agreements or advanced pricing agreements. They had different words to use, but the generic term was rulings. And this is what I was supposed to look for. And once I had the jargon and this keyword, I was able to start looking for those very specific documents. And as it happened, all the sources I talked to and the people that were familiar with the subject told me to not look that far away from where I was living, and instead of thinking of going there in the Cayman Island or the Bahamas, I should rather be going there, which was close to home. It was Luxembourg, because most of the people I talked to told me that Luxembourg was very good at initiating and having rulings to companies. The rulings, basically, I got a hand on a lot of them, a few hundreds. Most of them quite recent, from 2010, 2009, the oldest from the years 2000 and 2001. It's very arcane, and you need to have your sight really on who is going to be able to decipher them and help you understand what's in there. For this presentation, I was told to try to give my experience on what should be looked at when digging into these documents. If you don't have a leak, what should you be looking after in terms of tax issues? I took three, in the first documentary, we took three companies. One was Wendel, one was GSK, and the other one was Pearson, the main company, the editing company proper at the time. It was the owner of Financial Times. How to dig in the docs? Well, I spent a lot of time on the register of companies in Luxembourg, but that will be addressed by Simon later on as to what to look into public accounts of companies, because that's a big part of the work. If you don't have access to the document, you can still do a lot, and that's what I'm going to focus on, and I'm going to use two examples for this. One is the company Wendel. It may not tell you a lot, but in France it's a very old company. It was a dynasty for 300 years in steel. The person presiding it for quite some time was also the boss of the boss in France. His name is Ernest Antoine Sellière, was a very political figure. And once I saw that this company was in the file, I thought I would focus on it. It's a good example also today to go back on this example, because even if you don't have access to such a document, I was able to learn a lot through that company, going on the ground mainly after I got my hands on the public accounts. And when you go on field assignment, you can learn a lot, and that's what I wanted to show you. Maybe we can start the video and then I'll explain it to you. So that's the extract from the documentary about Wendel. Can we start the video? If it's working. It was working on my computer this morning, so. It's in the presentation, the movie. Yeah, if you click on it, you should.
So do you want to keep going?
Yeah. Maybe we can explain what was in.
Fix it while he keeps going. Can you try it or not?
So, well, in the sequence, you'll be able to. Can we see it on? No.
It doesn't stop. You have the movie separated on your memory stick.
Okay, I'll look at it later on. Maybe I finished. In this video, basically, I was going to the offices of the subsidiary, the Luxembourg subsidiary of the Wendel company, and as I wanted to show you through the video, it's not only good for television, but you are able to really assess what is the substance of the company going on the spot. It may seem as an evidence, but it's true. We were able to see a lot of empty desks and some signs of not much going on in that company. For instance, there were telephones that we could see from the outside of the building, and on each telephone you could see stickers with every single name of subsidiaries related to the same company in Luxembourg. And the offices were empty. Only 2 people worked there on a daily basis, mainly 2 secretaries. We saw 2 people from Paris there that day, and they just stayed there for an hour and a half or 2. And all these details, when you go on the field, are really important because they tell a lot about the real activity or the absence of such activity on the place. The other lesson I got from the Wendel file was that one should always look at the history of a company when investigating this. For instance, there was some trouble in the management of that company, and digging a bit into that company, I was able to see who was not happy there and meet them and then obtain some very useful explanation as to the history and what had happened in the company. And this is an extract of a note I obtained. It was 4 pages long, anonymous, but still very, very well informed regarding what they did before in that company. So that's not a leak. That's just doing basic work about a file that I was working on. It was a disgruntled employee, and there are many disgruntled employees in some companies, so you should look for them. The other thing is with these people, they do keep some stuff. So that's train tickets from Paris to Luxembourg. I just put one, but I had the other for the same day, so you could see that they were staying only a few hours in Luxembourg, and that's how you can add some evidences in your investigation as to what they are really doing in Luxembourg, or while they pretend to do a lot there, they don't do a lot, because most of the time they are in Paris and not in Luxembourg, and this was basically a shell company. Although lawyers, this is an extract from a court case involving one employee versus the Wendel company. And in that court case, the judge said that the employee only had one office in Paris, so the job in Luxembourg was actually not a real job. That's another stone to this investigation, to show that that particular company of the subsidiary of the Wendel Group was not, as such, a real company over there. So yeah, you can do while going on the spot and trying to see former employees. You can have loads of information. Another example in the files was British American tobacco. We had one particular file in the Luxembourg leaks, though I'd like to show you how, without having the documents, you can still learn a lot about a particular company. The public account for British American tobacco in France showed that they did not earn a lot of money. They declare profits over 6 million euros. They didn't pay a lot of taxes. We proved later on that they should have paid much more than these 6 millions, and instead of declaring a profit of 6 millions, it should be rather around 110 millions, which was a big difference. One way I was able to prove this was, for instance, proving that not much was going on in France, was showing that they were taking some actual decision in France regarding the market and the strategy of the company in that country. They were saying that they were not. One example is I went to LinkedIn and I looked for all former employees of British American Tobacco, especially in the management and advertising sector. And I don't have the slides available anymore, but I found several employees bragging about the budgets they were handling while at British American Tobacco France. And for some figures I got, it was from 15 to 30 million euros only in France. So that's one example where you can show that a lot more is going on in one country relating to a company when you compare it to the official budget they declare over there. And this is it for me. Thanks a lot. I will leave Simon and Christophe for the next.
Sorry for the video.
No, that's okay.
Okay. You can start the next PowerPoint, please. That's not the one.
We have a few technical problems, it looks like, in this. Thank you for your patience. We did do everything in advance, and it was working. But, you know, technology. There we go. Christophe, you have to run now.
Yes.
Run!
All right, thank you for your patience. So, I will tell you in a few words what's the story, and then especially I'll explain how we did it. Edouard in 2012 presented his story, which was a collaboration between the BBC and Cash Investigation. 2 years later, ICIJ took it to a global level. It was a big splash on November 5th when we exposed Luxembourg as a tax haven. Basically, the story was that there are more than 340 companies made these secret tax deals with the Luxembourg authorities, which allowed them to slash their global tax bills. This is where it took place. This is the office in Luxembourg, where the Luxembourg authorities would sit down with the companies and make the secret deals. Usually this was done by intermediate PricewaterhouseCoopers, which helped the multinational companies to obtain these tax rulings. Because of this, hundreds of billions of dollars passed through Luxembourg, and as a result, the national states lost a lot of tax income. This is in a few words what we presented in November. Then in December there was a second series of articles in which we showed that not only PricewaterhouseCoopers helped companies worldwide to obtain tax deals in Luxembourg, but also several other companies of the Big Four, and also other intermediates played a role. So 2 leaks exposing what took place in Luxembourg behind the scenes. Now, how do we do it? This is the point of the story we want to be sharing today. First of all, there was a leak of 28,000 pages. It's a lot of information. Over 548 secret tax rulings had to be looked at by us journalists. We handled that by, first of all, setting up a database. ICIJ has a great data team. Half of its staff It's actually data experts. So they put all the information coming from these PDF files into a database, and that was made searchable and shared with ICIJ reporters all over the world. In this investigation, LuxLeaks, it was a collaboration of over 80 journalists in 26 countries. So you can imagine the logistic challenge. Next to making a searchable database, a secure communication platform was set up, kind of iHub. You can compare to Facebook for journalists, so on which on a daily basis, Simon, Edouard, me, and all the other people on a daily basis commented to each other's research. We shared questions, we shared insights. This was really a very useful tool. But next to that, we also met in person, let's say half a year before the actual publication. There was a meeting in Brussels, which is good, you know, to gain trust, to look each other in the eye, to talk to each other. So it was basically a combination of a global online platform and a meeting in person that really kicked off the project. It was introduced by some experts who knew something about this complicated technical tax world, because frankly, for me as a journalist, I had never worked on any financial investigation. It was the first time, so I felt very, very small at that meeting in Brussels when I saw smart people like Simon and Edouard talking about tax industry. These were the challenges. Explain this kind of graphic to the readers, to our audiences. You know, make out of these complicated tax rulings a good story. That was the challenge for us as journalists. Now, how do we do it? Step one was analyze the rulings. Understand what's going on in those 48,000 pages. What's written there? Next to that, we used open sources to build the story, to make it more rich with new elements. We explored company registries. We also analyzed the Luxembourg tax law. We did interviews with the companies, knocked their door, and in the end we scraped the Luxembourg Gazette. All of these elements I'll be talking about in a bit more detail. So, first of all, let's analyze the rulings. I will give you 20 seconds to read this text. Who can explain me in normal words what's written here? Raise your hand. I'm so glad to see this reaction, because that was my first reaction as well. So this is the kind of language we had to fight ourselves through in order to make these stories. That was step number one. What we did to tackle this issue was ask for help. Help from tax experts, professors at universities, people who work in consulting firms who had some knowledge of this. And we asked them, please explain us what's written here so that we can understand better what's going on. You know, after a few days, weeks studying this, in the end you also understand it yourself without the expert, but this was really crucial. If you don't understand the issue, ask for help. Then we start digging open sources. Okay, take a Belgian company that was involved in the case, that had made a secret Luxembourg deal. What do we know about this company? Let's read all the newspaper articles that have been written about the company, check its website, look at social media of the employees. We started digging annual reports, financial statements through a database like Grade, and we found even more information. And this gave us a picture of the company involved. Also, simple things like Google Maps showed us sometimes where official addresses of subsidiaries were located, such as one you see here. And then the interesting thing is if you start analyzing the financial statements of some companies, like Luxco Videohold is one of the companies we worked around. There was a company with 150 million euro profit, and that very same year they paid 3,000 euro of taxes. This is the whole point. This is what we are talking about. So by going through Luxembourg, by making these secret tax deals, they managed to slash their tax bills. This is the story we had to tell our readers. In Belgium, by coincidence, there was a huge protest march coming exactly at the same day when ICIJ broke the story worldwide. And we thought, oh my God, all the focus is going to be on the protest. Nobody's going to look at our story. But the other thing happened. All the protesters walking in the streets of Brussels, they saw this. 3,000 euro of taxes on 150 million euro of profits, and they were outrageous. So this was only possible by looking at open source data that is available to anybody in the world. You find this kind of information by exploring company registries, not only the one of Luxembourg. I think Simon will be talking a bit more about this, but also of other tax havens like Curaçao, etc. In those open source information, for which you sometimes have to pay 5 to 10 euro, you find information such as addresses, the composition of the board of directors, statutes, etc. We also analyzed the tax law of Luxembourg, which was sometimes interesting because one of the political issues attached to this investigation was the question whether Mr. Juncker, the new president of the Commission, whether he had played any role in this whole Luxembourg game. And then we saw, for instance, that one article of the Luxembourg tax law, which allowed companies to not pay taxes on 80% of the profits in certain situations. This law was signed by Juncker himself in his function as the then finance minister. So there was a direct relation between Mr. Juncker and the whole LuxLeaks scandal. This was only possible by analyzing the law. Of course, as a journalist, you check, double check, you go and talk to the people that you're writing about. So we interviewed the companies, at least we gave the opportunity for an interview. Many of them refused to comment. Every now and then one company did send some answers. And the interesting thing is, as Edouard already pointed out, go and knock their door. It's so worth to take the train or take the plane to Luxembourg. Go and knock their door, because then you will end up at addresses like this, and then you start counting the letterbox. Wow, 1, 2, 3, 4, 50, 51. And then you realize the whole picture, that there was no real substance of those companies in Luxembourg. They just had an address, sometimes an office. You don't know that if you stay behind your computer in your office, so you have to go on the field, knock the door, and try to talk to the companies. And even though if maybe the company itself is not willing to talk, maybe the guy who is opening the door, who has some sympathy actually for the subject, he will tell you off the record things that are good to know. And then one last thing I was really impressed with, work done by the ICIJ data unit, is they scraped the Luxembourg Gazette. So this is like the official publication of Luxembourg, and where you will have all the addresses of all the companies in Luxembourg. And by scraping it, they found out, which I think is really super interesting, that there's one address, Rue Guillaume Kroll, number 5 in Luxembourg, where no less than 1,600 companies are registered. It's in this building, 1,600 companies. You can imagine the amount of money flowing through this one address. So this is open source work. Anybody could do that. You do not need a leak to scrape a gazette. This is how we did it. Thank you very much. Now I give the floor to Simon. More information you will find on the website.
So go ahead. Let's do the. So speaking of knocking on doors, I think we have the video working now, and we can see there the kind of on-the-ground reporting that Edouard and his team did in Luxembourg. So if we can show the video, cross fingers.
I just wanted to say I had to edit this to make it shorter. So there's a whole sequence I had to take out where I go and interview the 2 people you see taking the taxi, and then after I called the Paris communication head office, and they told me they had 6 employees, hence the 6 employees mentioned in the commentary. But I never saw 6 employees over there. I just saw the secretary and the 2 persons from Paris that escaped in a taxi later on. I edited all of this, but I talked to the 2 persons to ask them how often they would come to Luxembourg and why they were staying so on such a short time in Luxembourg. One of them was the legal counsel for the company, and the other one was the ethic director, which
Interesting.
is interesting.
Thank you. Simon.
Right. So I'm going to do the sort of geeky bit, I'm afraid. But I will say this is a little bit complicated. It gets simpler than this, but it still is a little bit complicated. If you follow it, you'll see. I hope you can see at the end that you don't need these leaks to discover these tax avoidance structures. They can be got to with a lot of digging, but they're there, and in fact they're everywhere. I would challenge you to find a global multinational that doesn't use this type of structure or similar. So the story is actually best told in these kind of diagrams, I think. But obviously, you starting here, it's problematic. It's massively complicated, and so what does it mean? We can see this is the same company. This company is called Shire. I don't know if you've heard of them. They're a FTSE 100 company listed in the UK, but they have most of their sales in the US. They sell they're best known for selling a pill for attention deficit disorder, which you should be taking that pill for this presentation. It is complicated, and but the company is absolutely massive, and this is their structure. If you see right at the top there, it says structure chart abridged. So this is the simplified version of their structure. So you can imagine, it gives a sense of what we're dealing with there. What does it mean? I'm going to skip a bit here up to here. So this now is a tiny corner of that bigger structure. So that's, if you see, can you see this bit here where it says Lux PE in a circle? If you go forward, you can see Lux PE is there. Now, Lux PE is important. We're going to come back to that. But just looking at that chart, can you also see it says there are the curved lines, by the way, that's money being lent. And you can see that the numbers are big there. It's over 6 billion. There's two curved lines that we're going to focus on. Ignore the one going to US market fund. There's a curved line going into the circle, and that's $6 billion US, and a curved line coming out of the dotted box into Shire Group companies. That's another $6 billion US. Okay. Now, if you elsewhere in the documents, you could see what these companies are abbreviated from. There's a company in Ireland and a company in Luxembourg, and we don't know exactly where the other companies are, but they're probably America or Germany. And so I've explained that this is an on-lending structure. So the company is headquartered in Ireland. It lends to the PE, it lends to Luxembourg, and then out of the dotted box, another loan comes. So there's two loans. Now, why this is all happening inside Shire, this massive global company, a loan from one corner of the company of the group to another corner of the group, but not only internal loan, it's two internal loans in a chain, and that is absolutely key. And you might ask, why would a company do that? There is no reason other than tax. There's no reason. This is what should happen in a normal world if you're looking at some loans. Loans sometimes. They're not. You've got to get your head around a loan, right? What it means for tax. If I lend money to Edouard, that's not relevant for tax. But when Edouard pays me interest, that interest is tax deductible for him. It's tax deductible expense for him. It's taxable income for me. Okay, I will have to pay tax on that. He will get a tax deduction. So if we go back to the diagram here, on the top loan there, you've got a tax deduction and a taxable income. And on the bottom loan, you've got tax deduction and taxable income. The net effect is flat. These are all companies in the same group, so there will be no benefit. That's how it should be, okay? But of course, this is a complicated mess, and they've set it up to sort of pervert that from happening. So we're going to look now at, there's two companies there. Shill 2 is in Ireland, and She's 2 is in Luxembourg. We're going to go to Luxembourg. This is what you find from the Luxembourg accounts, stretching back years. And you see in 2013, that's $10 billion US loaned out from that company, that tiny. You saw the kind of companies that we're talking about in Edouard's video. We did a video with Shire. It's the same. This is an internal bank, $10 billion being lent elsewhere across the group, and it has no substance, next to no substance. But you get a sense of the size of it. And then the money flows through the company. You can see it's got huge amounts of interest coming into the company, but it doesn't pay any interest back out. Remember, this is an on-lending structure, so you would expect interest to pour in from other Shire companies into Luxembourg, and out of the dotted box, you'd expect to see, all things being equal, interest to be flowing back out as well. This company made almost $2 billion in profits in 6 years. So now, we were looking there at the bottom company previously, She's 2 in the dotted box there, and you saw the effect of the loans that it made to other companies in the group. So what about the top loan, the mirror loan? How is that treated? This is where the sort of tax magic happens. See, in Ireland, this is what, well, actually, let me just explain one more thing about this. So that loan, what does that mean? You see there in the diagram, they're treated differently. The loan is from a square to a sort of oval shape. Now, that oval shape signifies that is a branch. It's not actually a company in its own right. So what does it actually mean for a company in Ireland to lend to an office it has in Luxembourg? What does that mean? At this point, certainly my head hurts. It's a difficult concept. It's really like me taking £5 or €5 out of my left pocket and putting it into my right pocket and saying my right pocket owes my left pocket a fiver. I mean, it's that nonsensical. So when you get to the Irish accounts, those loans are not there at all. They don't show. I mean, think about it. A company's accounts, how could it show that it was lending from one office to another office? It wouldn't show. It wouldn't be recognized. And one confirmation of that happening is we could see that the supposed income the interest income ought to have with it large tax bills, and they weren't happening in Ireland. So you can see there's over 6 billion loans, and they exist for Luxembourg tax purposes, but they are invisible for Irish tax purposes. Remember, that's the diagram I showed before. That's how the tax system should look, and that's how it ends up looking. Should look, you get taxable income at one end of each loan and a taxable expense at the other end. But in this, the way that they trick, they use the Irish tax rules that against the Luxembourg tax rules. There's a mismatch, a confusion, and that taxable income disappears. I'll skip that slide. And this is now that I know that was very geeky, and it was a run through, and I'm sure it was however much Adderall you took, it was hard to follow. But if you really study those diagrams, I've got in my notepad. I spent several weeks building another chart which is almost identical to that structure, involving this other drug company, AstraZeneca. This is a story we ran this week, and it shows exactly the same. It's two loans and one loan. It's structured across the border, this time using the Netherlands, and the taxable income disappears. So That's why I wanted to show you every company's doing it, really everyone. And that's just one example of how you can get to exposing an avoidance structure without the leaks. So thank you.
Excellent. So we have some time for questions. Do we have a microphone available? And hands up. Who wants to ask a question? There's the microphone. So one of the questions that I have to start with for you guys is, how do we make readers care about a topic this complex and in some cases this dry as tax, right? It seems removed, it seems complicated, it seems too financial. So how do you make people care, regular citizens? Who wants to take that one?
Well, as I told you, there was a protest march in Belgium against austerity measures of the Belgian government, and exactly at that day we showed that whereas the ordinary citizens who pay quite some taxes lost benefits, at the same time Belgian companies, very rich companies, hardly paid any taxes by making these secret tax deals in Luxembourg. So it was very clear to all the citizens that this was a story that mattered to them. What I do not know is whether every person has read every single article to the very end. Maybe not, but the message definitely arrived also because we published with 3 media in Belgium the story, and it was picked up by all the other media. And then a complicated structure like Simon explained it to you now in 10 minutes is explained in 1 minute to the readers, and they just remember the bottom line, like, okay, by setting up these tax rulings in Luxembourg and other countries, by the way, as well, rich companies manage to pay hardly any taxes. This is what they remember, maybe without not always knowing all the details, and the message arrived. So, of course, it works better if there are names of companies that everybody's familiar with. Like we were lucky in Belgium to have some Luxembourg subsidiaries of the famous beer families. You know, Belgium is famous for its beer, Stella Artois, Lef Blonde, etc. Everybody knows it. So if you can connect a brand to a story like this, it sells even better. There you got to be lucky. But as Simon pointed out, most of the big brands and multinationals are involved in these kind of schemes. So actually, they work pretty well, Marina.
Just on that point, I mean, I think it is problematic. These are it's a real journalistic challenge. Even when you finally have had your eureka moment, you understand the structure. Explaining it to people in that sort of pithy way, you'll never guess what. And you know, what is your next sentence? It's nigh on impossible. But the thing that I think worked best for us, and it's the key is Edouard's videos. If you show that these are massive companies in their accounts with billions and billions of dollars of loans, and then you actually go and knock on the door of that company, and it's the match is confronting the reader with, this is a huge company on paper, and there is no one in the office. That is the impact, and that tells everything, I think.
Or like in the case of Disney, for example, where we went to the office and all we could find was duct tape on the door saying Disney. Yeah. So they didn't even invest in a proper, sign. Questions from the audience? Yes, we have a question there. Oh, sorry, there and then there.
Hello, my name is Šarūnas Černiauskas. I'm from Lithuania, and I have a question to Eduard. As I see, you have some trouble with your law enforcement, and I'd like to ask what kind of charges they pressed against you, and maybe were there some mistakes you made, and if you hadn't made them, maybe it would be easier for you now to tackle them. Thank you.
He's asking about the court case, right? Yeah. And how did that come about, and did you make any mistakes in the story?
Can you repeat what slower?
Oh, sorry. Basically, were there any mistakes you made during your investigations that made it easier for the law enforcement to go after you?
Do you understand?
Yeah, I don't think so, because apparently most of the investigation was due to internal investigation and forensics. So that's beyond my own work, that I cannot do anything about it, as far as I understand.
Can you tell us a little bit more about whatever you can talk at this point about your court case, and also what are the implications not only for you personally, but also for investigative journalism in Europe, where a reporter can be indicted in European soil for a story in which, to clarify, you did not make mistakes in your reporting.
No.
If I was understanding correctly what the question, so the question is not about they found mistakes and now they're suing. It's very different. So can you explain better?
Personally, now I'm indicted, so I've not all my freedom of speech. I have to be really careful about what I say. The case is, the instruction is closed, so it's going to go to a chamber of accusation in the weeks to come, and from then on to a trial. What it means beyond my personal case is very interesting. Right now in Europe, we've got a project for a draft directive on trade secrets. One of the indictments is I breached trade secrets in Luxembourg, and I would take the opportunity to stress that the draft directive, being in the European institution right now, is going to be a real threat for journalist work all over Europe. Whether or not countries will take steps to criminalize the breach of trade secrets, or whether it's going to stay only at a civil level, it's going to be much more difficult if that directive goes through for reporters, for the simple reason that a trade secret is going to be decided by the companies. So companies are going to deem something secret, and then it's going to be secret. So they can deem anything secret. The other very important consequence for reporters regarding that directive is it's not only when you publish a trade secret breach, it's when you acquire it. And it's very clear in the text. So from the very moment you have knowledge of this trade secret breach, you are breaching it, basically. So it's the acquisition, use, and publication of trade secrets. In France, we have successfully fought a similar text in January. There was a project for a bill on that matter, and we killed it, basically. That's why we discovered this European directive later on. We are trying to raise the alerts in Europe regarding it. It's not only a matter for reporters, it's a matter for NGOs and the general public. For instance, pharmaceutical trials are going to be deemed trade secrets. So what if you want to talk about a secondary effect of a drug, and you cannot use clinical trials anymore? It has far-reaching consequences. I wanted to share this with you because it's a very important piece of legislation that has been in the pipe for quite some years now. I think it's 2013, and we've been alerted to. I mean, I think we slept on this quite too long. And that was one of the indictments I got in Luxembourg. That's why I'm talking about this.
Trade secrets?
Trade secrets, yeah.
I had a question about the structures themselves. So, Simon, when you showed the document with kind of outlining the structure of intercompany loans, did that come from a leak, or was that something that you kind of constructed retrospectively from public documents?
No, those diagrams were all from the leak, but like I say, you can what's the word? Reverse engineer them from the accounts of companies. But you have to have knowledge of what a template might look like, and then once you've done the mapping process from the leak to the public accounts, you can then dispense with the leak and look at the public accounts for other companies, and they are everywhere.
And I had another question. Have any of you considered, or have you looked at the deal makers, so PwC and the actual lawyers within these companies who are making the laws that allow companies to, well, that's why the companies employ them in the first place, to avoid tax?
I would say that, Luxembourg, this is about, I can't remember the title of this session, but it's about tax havens. Luxembourg is and the Netherlands, Belgium, Ireland, the UK. There's a cluster of economies that are half tax havens and half not. And if your question's about the sort of legislative process there is a sort of drifting in that direction, but they're in an absolute sweet spot, because these purport to be real economies, and they are real economies, but they, if you're in the club of real economies, you're connected in terms of global trade in a way that a full tax haven like the Caymans is not. But if you're offering these kind of sweetheart deals, you're not an honest actor in the drama of globalized trade, and that's increasingly what's been happening, and the multinational corporations are playing off countries against each other, and the smaller countries like Ireland, like Luxembourg, that's why their policies have drifted so far towards, I think, tax haven behaviors.
And building on that question, what is the role of the intermediaries of the big accounting firms, big and small, like PwC, for example, in these deals?
Well, obviously not every company has tax experts working for them, so in order to make these kind of deals, they would look for an intermediate like PricewaterhouseCoopers, where the first leak came from, or any other of the big four, or even other consultancy firms. So they are the intermediate. They know the people in Luxembourg, because it's a small government team in Luxembourg, so it helps, obviously, if you have these human relationships. Of course, we spoke to the intermediates. That was just more a practical question. Okay, journalists from 28 countries, are they all going to call to PricewaterhouseCoopers, or is ICIJ gonna do it? And I think there we did different steps. Marina, remind me. For sure, ICIJ first, as one focal point, addressed PricewaterhouseCoopers. Meanwhile, also some other bigger media contacted them. I don't know if you want to add something to that.
Yeah. So we usually try, we try different strategies, but we went, first ICIJ and a few larger media. We ask our questions, right? And then, but reporters were free to obviously ask also questions from the local branches of PwC in their own countries.
I think the most powerful sort of criticism I've seen of PwC in this affair has been some television interviews that Antoine Deltour gave, and he gave, he was a young guy who worked at PwC, and he's been indicted, and but he basically he went to work there as a trainee. He explains in his television interviews. And he just was appalled by what he saw, and he didn't want to be part of it. And it's that is quite striking if you listen to what he has to say.
One should add that we were dealing with PwC, but there are 3 other major actors on the market, plus dozens of smaller structures providing the same services. It's an industry. It's a real industry. It was the object of a full investigation by the US Senate in, I think, 2005. And KPMG was thoroughly investigated at that time, and the US Senate and Senator Levin showed it pretty clearly how massive this industry was and how they would market their services just as any other industry, cold calling companies and telling them, well, you should take our services because your competitors do. So if you don't do it, you're going to lose. And that was pretty much obvious at that time. This is something that was known, and the scale of it too. What we had through LuxLeaks was the inside apparatus and how it was done, basically.
Yeah. Maybe one element that we should stress and that we haven't stressed yet, everything we talked about was legal.
Yeah.
Everything was legal. This was the most outraging part maybe of it, that everything we exposed was legal. Because there was one country in the world that put its signature under these kind of agreements, everything was legal. Well, that being said, there might still be some tax authorities in some countries that might have a second look at the rulings and maybe revoke some of its legality. But the bottom line of it is that everything was legal.
Quite a nice story around the subject of the law and advisors. An in-house, Amazon didn't really feature very strongly in the data, but they are now subject to a European Commission state aid investigation into their tax ruling with Luxembourg, which was struck in 2003. And the head of tax at Amazon was a chap called Bob Comfort, and he bizarrely gave an interview to a Luxembourg blogger a couple of years ago, and he explained in this interview, about Amazon deciding where in Europe were we going to have our base, and they already had businesses in Germany and France and the UK, but they decided to sort of make a hub in Luxembourg, and the head of tax was conversationally saying, well, yeah, I met with Juncker, he's a decent guy, and he sort of slapped me on the back and said, you have any problem with my boys in the tax office, and you come and see me, and I'll sort you out. And that was sort of the language. I'm not really exaggerating very much. And scroll on to today, Bob Comfort is moved back to the US, and he's retired from Amazon, but he holds a new role, which is honorary consul to the Seattle region for Luxembourg. You couldn't make it up.
And also, just a few months after LuxLeaks was published, Amazon announced that for the first time in its history in Europe, they were going to start paying taxes in Germany, UK, and France on profits that they had made in Luxembourg. So, any other questions? Otherwise, it's time to wrap up. Okay, last question here.
Only small information, and Mati Munjib, professor in investigation, interdiction departure to Lillehammer in airport Rabat, Morocco, with motivation harassment against activists Moroccan.
I couldn't understand.
Because the Moroccan authority no want investigation journalist. So Mati Munjib make a hunger strike in Morocco now for 3 days.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for your solidarity.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you to the 3 gentlemen here.
Thank you.